Invisible threads. The blueprints spread across his desk like the map of a foreign country. Alexander Reed rubbed his tired eyes, the evening shadows stretching across his downtown office. At 42, he had built Reed Architecture into one of Seattle's most respected firms. But lately, the success felt hollow. His phone buzzed. Sophia, his third missed call today. "Alex, it's me again." Her voice sounded distant on the voicemail. "The reservation is at 8. Please don't forget this time." A pause. "It's our anniversary." Alexander closed his eyes, guilt washing over him. 10 years of marriage, and he'd nearly forgotten. Again. He texted back quickly, "Running late. Meet you there." "Sorry." Sophia Reed stood before their bedroom mirror, adjusting the silver pendant Alexander had given her on their 5th anniversary. At 38, her dark hair now carried subtle streaks of silver that she'd stopped coloring last year. What was the point? She smoothed the silky fabric of her dress, wondering when exactly they had started drifting apart. The restaurant was dimly lit, romantic. She sat alone for 40 minutes, smiling awkwardly at the server's pitying glances. When Alexander finally arrived, his tie loosened and hair slightly disheveled, she knew. "The Harrison project deadline moved up," he explained, kissing her cheek. "The client is impossible." "It's always a deadline," Sophia replied, her voice even. She'd stopped showing disappointment years ago. "It's fine." But it wasn't fine. They both knew it. The conversation stuttered through dinner like a car with engine trouble, occasional flares of their old connection quickly fading to silence. Across town, Olivia Chen sat in her small office, surrounded by botanical sketches and soil samples. At 34, she had built a reputation as one of the city's most innovative landscape designers. Tonight, she was working late again, her dedication to crafting living spaces matched only by Alexander's passion for structures. "You're still here?" her assistant asked, coat already on. "Just finishing the concept for the waterfront project," Olivia replied, brushing a strand of her shoulder-length black hair behind her ear. "The architects want it tomorrow. Reed Architecture, right?" Her assistant smiled. "I heard the lead architect is intense." Olivia nodded absently. "So I've heard." The next morning, sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the conference room as Olivia spread her designs across the table. When Alexander walked in, their eyes met briefly, professionally. Neither could have predicted what that moment would begin. "These are remarkable," he said, studying her vision of flowing gardens that complemented his building perfectly. "You understood exactly what the space needed." "Your structure speaks," Olivia replied. "I just listened." Over the following weeks, what began as professional admiration evolved into something more. Coffee meetings to discuss the project became lunch breaks where they talked about everything else. His marriage troubles, her recent breakup, their shared love of obscure jazz and kayaking. "You're easy to talk to," Alexander told her one evening as they walked through the project site, the setting sun casting everything in gold. "I haven't felt this understood in years." Sophia noticed the subtle changes in her husband, the extra attention to his appearance, the mysterious smiles at text messages, the renewed energy despite supposedly longer hours. One night she reached for him in bed, and for the first time in their marriage, he turned away. "Just tired," he murmured. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the invisible threads of their marriage unraveling strand by strand. In the darkness, she made a decision. If Alexander wouldn't fight for them, perhaps it was time she fought for herself. Meanwhile, Olivia stood on her apartment balcony, staring at her phone and the last message from Alexander. "Can't stop thinking about you." Her finger hovered over the reply button, knowing that her next words would either sever a dangerous connection or strengthen it beyond turning back. Whispers in the dark. The autumn rain tapped against the windows of Olivia's downtown apartment as Alexander sat across from her at her small dining table. Steam rose from mugs of tea between them, but neither drank. Their project had been completed weeks ago, yet here they were, the pretense of final details wearing increasingly thin. "Sophia asked about you yesterday," Alexander said, his voice low. "She saw your name on my recent calls." Olivia's fingers tensed around her mug. "What did you tell her?" "That we're still finalizing the landscaping installation." He looked down. Another lie to add to the growing collection. The weight of what they were doing hung between them, unspoken but undeniable. What had begun as innocent connection had transformed into lingering glances, casual touches that lasted too long, and now private meetings away from colleagues' eyes. "We should stop this," Olivia said, not for the first time. "Whatever this is." Alexander reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. "I know, but when I'm with you, I remember who I used to be. Before the deadlines and expectations. Before I started disappearing into my work." "You're married, Alex," she whispered, but didn't pull her hand away. That night, when Alexander returned home, Sophia was waiting in the living room, a glass of wine in her hand. The photographs from their honeymoon in Greece lay spread across the coffee table. "Remember how happy we were?" she asked, her voice tinged with something between nostalgia and accusation. Alexander sat beside her, guilt gnawing at him. "We were young." "We were in love," Sophia corrected, turning to face him. "What happened to us, Alex?" For a brief moment, Alexander considered confessing everything. Instead, he took her hand and squeezed it gently. "We got busy, distracted. Is that all it is? Distraction?" Her eyes searched his, and Alexander felt transparent, exposed. "Of course," he lied. "Work has been consuming me." "I'll do better." For a week, he tried. He came home earlier, brought flowers, asked about her photography, which she'd once loved but had abandoned when her gallery job became too demanding. They made love for the first time in months, but afterward, Sophia felt Alexander's distance despite his physical presence beside her. The following Tuesday, Olivia texted him, "I can't stop thinking about you either. We need to talk." They met at a quiet cafe far from their usual haunts. "This isn't who I am," Olivia said, her voice trembling. "I never wanted to be this person, the other woman, the secret. But when I'm with you—" Alexander took her hand, no longer caring who might see. "I know. What are we doing, Alex?" The question hung between them until Alexander finally answered. "I don't know, but I can't pretend I don't feel something real for you." That night became the first time they crossed the final line. In the dim light of Olivia's bedroom, whispered confessions and touches replaced professional boundaries. Afterward, Alexander stared at the ceiling, feeling both liberated and imprisoned by his choices. Meanwhile, Sophia sat alone in their home, Alexander's laptop open before her. He had forgotten to log out of his email. The messages between him and Olivia told a story she had suspected, but hadn't wanted to confirm. Professional exchanges that evolved into personal confidences, and finally, arrangements to meet that had nothing to do with work. Instead of crying, Sophia felt an odd, cold clarity. She closed the laptop and walked to the spare room where her camera equipment gathered dust. She picked up her Nikon, turning it over in her hands, remembering the passion she once had for capturing life's hidden beauty. Perhaps it was time to look through that lens again, to see the truth of her life clearly. For the next 2 weeks, Alexander lived a divided existence. With Sophia, he performed the role of repentant husband, making promises his heart couldn't keep. With Olivia, he tasted freedom and connection that made him feel alive again. The guilt was constant, but not enough to make him stop. "We can't go on like this," Olivia said one evening as they lay tangled together. "Either you choose your marriage or you choose something new." "With me?" Alexander traced her face with his fingertips. "I need time to do this right. Sophia deserves that much." But time was running out. Sophia had begun following Alexander, her camera serving as both shield and weapon. Through her lens, she documented her husband's betrayal, Alexander and Olivia entering her apartment building, their intimate lunch at a secluded restaurant, the way they looked at each other when they thought no one was watching. Each photograph crystallized her resolve. She was done being the waiting wife, the one left behind while her husband built a new life in the shadows. Alexander, oblivious to his wife's awakening, planned what he considered a proper farewell to his marriage. He would take Olivia to Meridian, the exclusive restaurant where he and Sophia had once celebrated their engagement. There, he would promise Olivia a future together. The next day, he would finally tell Sophia the truth. "Are you sure about this?" Olivia asked when he told her his plan. "It seems disrespectful. I need to do something definitive," he insisted. "No more hiding. After tomorrow, everything changes." What Alexander couldn't know was that Sophia had seen his reservation confirmation in his email. She knew exactly where he would be and with whom. And she had plans of her own. The shattered glass. The private dining room at Meridian glowed with the warm light of candles and the soft amber wall sconces. Alexander arrived early, inspecting every detail. The bottle of 2015 Barolo, Olivia's favorite. The small bouquet of anemones, which she once mentioned, reminded her of resilience. The view of the Seattle skyline, glittering like scattered stars against the night. A text from Olivia, running 5 minutes late. "Can't wait to see you." Alexander adjusted his tie, rehearsing the words he would say. Not just to Olivia tonight, but to Sophia tomorrow. Endings and beginnings all within 24 hours. His stomach knotted with both anticipation and dread. Across town, Sophia slipped into a black dress she hadn't worn in years. She applied her makeup with precision, each stroke of mascara, each dab of lipstick an act of armor building. In her purse, the stack of photographs she had taken, physical evidence of Alexander's betrayal. Not that she needed it anymore. Her purpose tonight wasn't to convince, it was to conclude. "You look beautiful," the rideshare driver commented as she entered his car. "Thank you," Sophia replied. "It's a special occasion." At the restaurant, Olivia hesitated before entering. Her cream-colored dress felt suddenly too revealing, too celebratory for what was, ultimately, built on deception. But Alexander's smile when he saw her, relief, desire, and something like love, pushed her doubts momentarily aside. "You came," he said, taking her hands. "Did you think I wouldn't?" He led her to the table, pulling out her chair. "I wouldn't have blamed you. This situation is complicated," she offered. "I was going to say unfair to you," Alexander replied. "You deserve better than secrets and divided attention." The server brought the wine, pouring 2 glasses. Alexander raised his. "To new beginnings?" Olivia hesitated, then lifted hers. "To truth, whatever comes with it." They clinked glasses just as the door to the private dining room opened. Both turned, expecting the server. Instead, Sophia stood in the doorway, calm and poised in a way that terrified Alexander more than any rage could have. The room froze in tableau. Alexander half risen from his chair, wine glass still in hand. Olivia, eyes wide with recognition and shame. Sophia, surveying the scene with detached interest, as if viewing one of her photographs. "Sophia," Alexander managed, his voice barely audible. Without being invited, Sophia walked to their table and pulled out the 3rd chair. "Please," she said with unnerving tranquility, "don't let me interrupt your celebration." Olivia set down her glass, hands trembling. "Mrs. Reed, it's Sophia, please," she corrected. "And you should stay, Olivia. After all, we're celebrating new beginnings, aren't we?" She turned to Alexander. "That was the toast, wasn't it?" Alexander's face had drained of color. "This isn't how I wanted you to find out." "No?" Sophia's smile never reached her eyes. "How did you want it, exactly? A gentle conversation tomorrow over breakfast? Pass the coffee, darling, and by the way, I'm leaving you for my landscape designer." The server returned, stopping abruptly at the door when he sensed the tension. "Should I come back?" "Actually," Sophia said, "I'd love a glass of whatever they're drinking. Apparently, it's worth celebrating with." After the stunned server poured her wine and retreated, an excruciating silence descended. Olivia stared at her plate, unable to meet either of their eyes. Alexander seemed frozen, caught between his past and his planned future. Sophia finally broke the silence, setting a stack of photographs on the table. "Did you know I started taking pictures again? You were always my favorite subject, Alex." Alexander looked down at the images, himself and Olivia entering her apartment building, sharing intimate moments in public, the evidence of weeks of deception spread out beside the wine and untouched appetizers. "How long have you known?" he asked. "Long enough," Sophia replied. "What I find fascinating is how predictable this all is. The younger woman, the secret meetings, the plans made while I waited at home. Did you use the same lines on her that you once used on me?" Olivia finally found her voice. "This was never my intention. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Few of us intend to become villains in someone else's story," Sophia said, her composure finally cracking slightly. Yet here we are. She stood, smoothing her dress. I won't stay for dinner. I've seen enough. She looked directly at Alexander. I've packed some of your things. They're by the door. Don't come home tonight. As she turned to leave, Alexander reached for her arm. Sophia, please. She pulled away, her voice soft but firm. 10 years, Alex. 10 years of building a life while you built your career. I deserved better than this ending. With quiet dignity, Sophia walked out. The door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow echoed louder than any slam could have. In the aftermath of her exit, Alexander and Olivia sat in suffocating silence, the romantic setting now grotesque in its inappropriateness. The candles, the wine, the carefully chosen flowers, all of it a monument to selfishness and betrayal. Olivia spoke first. I can't do this. Olivia, wait. No. She stood, gathering her purse. What just happened? The look in her eyes. I can't be the person who causes that kind of pain. This isn't just about her and me, Alexander insisted. What we have is real. Maybe, Olivia conceded. But it's poisoned now. Can you honestly say you could build something lasting on this foundation? As she walked out, leaving Alexander alone with the evidence of his betrayal and the ruins of 2 relationships, a single wine glass, Sophia's untouched one, tipped over, the red liquid spreading across the white tablecloth like blood. Separate shores. The apartment Alexander rented overlooked Puget Sound, but he rarely noticed the view. 3 weeks had passed since that night at Meridian, and the wreckage of his life remained strewn around him like debris after a storm. Cardboard boxes filled with hastily gathered possessions sat unopened in corners. Takeout containers accumulated on the kitchen counter. His phone, once constantly buzzing with notifications, now remained largely silent. Sophia had filed for divorce with the same quiet efficiency with which she had confronted him at the restaurant. The papers arrived with a note. I deserve peace. So do you. No accusations, no demands beyond what was legally fair. Her restraint felt like its own form of condemnation. Olivia had stopped answering his calls after the first week. Her final text read, We both need to heal separately. Please respect that. He had drafted dozens of replies but sent none. What could he say that wasn't another selfish plea? On a gray Wednesday morning, Alexander found himself in the waiting room of Dr. Eleanor Walsh, therapist. The decision to come hadn't been entirely his own. The partners at his firm had noted his distraction, the errors in his designs, the missed meetings. Take some time, they suggested. Get help. What brings you here today? Dr. Walsh asked once he was seated in her office, the sound of a small fountain creating a gentle background rhythm. Alexander stared at his hands. I destroyed my marriage. And possibly my career. That's the outcome, she noted. But not the why. For the next hour, Alexander unraveled the threads of his choices. Not just the affair with Olivia, but the years before, how he had gradually replaced intimacy with achievement, connection with advancement. I don't know who I am anymore, he admitted. Husband, lover, architect, I've failed at everything that matters. Perhaps, Dr. Walsh suggested as their time ended, before you can rebuild, you need to understand what foundation you're building upon. Across the city, Sophia stood in an empty storefront in Pike Place Market, measuring the light that streamed through the windows. After leaving her gallery job, too many memories of hosting shows with Alexander by her side, she had taken a risk, using her portion of their joint savings to lease this small space. It gets great afternoon light, the realtor noted, watching Sophia photograph the room from different angles. It's perfect, Sophia decided. I'll take it. 2 weeks later, Through the Lens photography studio and gallery opened its doors. Sophia's work, once relegated to a hobby, now hung on crisp white walls, stark black and white studies of urban architecture, intimate portraits of Seattle residents, and a single collection in the back room titled Aftershocks, the photographic diary of her marriage's end, carefully edited to reveal emotion without exposing identities. A local arts blog featured her opening, bringing unexpected attention. Clients began booking portrait sessions. A nearby cafe asked to display her work. For the first time in years, Sophia felt the thrill of creating something entirely her own. Miles away in Portland, Olivia sat in her new office at a prestigious landscape design firm. The move had been impulsive but necessary. Too many shared spaces in Seattle held memories of Alexander. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "How's the new place?" "Still unpacking," she replied. "But it feels right." That evening, Olivia attended a community garden planning meeting where she met Julian, an environmental lawyer with kind eyes and a passion for urban green spaces. When he asked about her background, she hesitated before answering. "I'm starting over," she said simply, learning from past mistakes. His smile was gentle. "Aren't we all?" After the storm, the gallery hummed with conversation and the soft jazz playing from hidden speakers. Sophia moved among her guests with practiced ease, a glass of sparkling water in hand, her silver-streaked hair now fully embraced and styled in a chic bob. The photographs on display, a series capturing urban renewal, projects throughout Seattle, had already garnered praise from a critic from the Seattle Arts Monthly who was currently engaged in animated conversation with a collector in the corner. When Alexander entered, Sophia felt his presence before she saw him. A year had changed him. The designer suits and carefully styled hair had given way to something more relaxed. Dark jeans, a simple button-down, slightly longer hair. He carried himself differently too, without the urgent importance that had once defined his movements. Their eyes met across the room. She nodded slightly in acknowledgement, then returned to her conversation. Alexander understood the message. This was her space, her moment. He would wait. He moved slowly through the exhibition, studying each photograph carefully. Sophia had always had an eye for finding beauty in transformation, abandoned factories becoming community centers, neglected parks blooming again under community care, historic buildings repurposed rather than destroyed. Alexander recognized his own shelter project among them, captured from an angle that emphasized the light streaming through, windows he had specifically designed to bring warmth to those who had known too. Little of it. "She has an extraordinary talent," said a voice beside him. Alexander turned to find a woman with cropped gray hair and artist's hands extending her hand. "Caroline Winters, Seattle Arts Monthly." "Alexander Reed," he replied, shaking her hand. "And yes, she always did. I just failed to notice for too long." Understanding dawned in Caroline's eyes. "The ex-husband? Is it that obvious?" "Only in the way you look at her and the photographs." Caroline smiled kindly. Her early work had anger in it. These have something else entirely. After an hour, the crowd thinned. Alexander found himself alone with Sophia in a quiet corner of the gallery. Up close, he could see the new confidence in her posture, the absence of the anxious habit of tucking her hair behind her ear. "Thank you for coming," she said, "and for your work on the shelter. It made a difference to a lot of people." "Your photographs capture it better than my blueprints ever did," he replied. "You always saw what I missed." A complex silence stretched between them, filled with a year's worth of unsaid words. "Are you happy, Sophia?" Alexander finally asked. She considered the question seriously. "I'm peaceful, sometimes exhilarated, occasionally lonely, but yes, most days I'm happy." She met his gaze directly. "Are you?" "Getting there," he answered honestly. "The therapy helped. So did losing everything I thought was important and finding out what actually is." Sophia nodded. "Olivia, have you—" "No," Alexander shook his head. "That ended truly the night you found us. Last I heard, she moved to Portland. In fact, at that very moment, Olivia was sitting on the porch of a small bungalow she now shared with Julian, reviewing plans for their biggest project yet, a series of connected community gardens that would create green corridors through formerly industrial neighborhoods. Her phone showed a notification from a Seattle news app. A feature on emerging artists mentioned Sophia's exhibition. "Everything okay?" Julian asked, bringing her a cup of tea. Olivia smiled, setting down her phone. "Just ghost settling," she said. "Nothing to worry about." Back at the gallery, closing time approached. Alexander helped Sophia pack up some display materials, their movements around each other cautious, but not uncomfortable. I have a commission to photograph restoration projects in Chicago next month, Sophia mentioned. My first major out-of-state job. That's wonderful, Alexander said sincerely. They're lucky to have your perspective. As they finished, Alexander gathered his courage. Would you have coffee with me sometime? Not to try to fix anything, just to talk. Sophia considered him thoughtfully. I'm not the same person you married, Alex, or the one you left. I know, he said. I'm not asking to go backward. I don't even know what I'm asking for exactly. Just conversation. As the people we are now. She hesitated, then nodded. Coffee, as friends who once knew each other well and might want to know who they've become. She wrote down her new number on a gallery card. Call me when you get back from Vancouver. The shelter project there should keep you busy for a few weeks. Alexander looked surprised. You know about Vancouver? Your firm's website, she explained with a small smile. I keep track of good architecture for my photography, even when it's yours. As Alexander left the gallery, a light rain had begun to fall, washing the city streets clean. He thought about the separate paths they had all traveled since that devastating night at Meridian. How pain had eventually given way to growth, betrayal to forgiveness. Not the kind that erased consequences, but the kind that allowed moving forward. Olivia had found new love built on honesty. Sophia had discovered strength and talent within herself that might have remained dormant in their comfortable marriage. And Alexander, he had lost the most and deserved to, but had finally begun to understand himself beyond ambition and desire. 6 blocks away, he passed the site of the waterfront project where he had first met Olivia. The building stood completed, her landscaping now mature, wild grasses swaying slightly in the evening breeze. Different choices at any point could have led to different outcomes. Yet standing here now, Alexander felt something unexpected. Not regret for what was lost, but acceptance of what was necessary. His phone buzzed with a text from his contractor in Vancouver. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove he had learned from his mistakes. He tucked Sophia's card carefully into his wallet. Not a promise, but a possibility. The rain intensified, but Alexander didn't hurry his pace. Some journeys couldn't be rushed. Some storms needed to be weathered fully before the sky could clear. And some broken things, when carefully examined and honestly mended, could become stronger at the fractured places, never the same, but perhaps, in time, something equally valuable. As city lights reflected in rain-slicked streets, 3 separate lives continued forward, connected by shared history but no longer defined by it. The night embraced them all equally, Sophia in her gallery, Olivia in her Portland home, Alexander on his solitary walk. Each breathing easier than they had a year before, each finally facing forward instead of back.